Take it away.
Okay, so today we're going to have a look at the controversial issue. Should we be concerned about the melting of ice in polar regions? This morning, as soon as I turned on the news, global warming was one of the main headlines. It's a key issue within geography, but also just a wider issue within society. What is global warming doing to the world? So we're going to look at, should we be concerned about these global issues within the polar region? So, the aim of the lesson: how global climate change is affecting the polar regions, why we should be concerned about the melting of ice within these regions, and the potential benefits that the melting of ice can bring. Some people don't think of that, but there is actual potential benefits which we'll look at, and then we'll decide at the end, should we actually be concerned about global warming. Okay, so global climate change. We have a little quote here by McMahon. The Arctic is now experiencing some of the most rapid and severe climate changes on Earth. The reason that they're saying this is the warming up of the Earth's atmosphere, and particularly in the polar regions such as the Arctic and the Antarctic, the top layer of ice is beginning to melt. In December 2007, there was the largest increase in surface water temperature, and this was recorded at 5 degrees Celsius above the actual average. The polar regions recently had the lowest ice coverage in more than 40 years. That quote was taken in 2007. And the prediction is that the thickness of the ice will continue to decrease 10% each year. And this will have a knock-on effect on the ecosystem within the Arctic. Okay, so the projected Arctic conditions by 2090 to 2100. There's a general vulnerability to warming and a lack of adaptive capacity of Arctic species and ecosystems. So we have to consider how will both the communities and the habitats cope with this melting ice. If you look up at the diagram I've got here, this is the current Arctic conditions, and there's the projected Arctic conditions by 2090 to 2100. This here is the ice at the minute. This here is going to be the ice pack that's left. Now you have to consider the ice pack is where the majority of the animals live. So this was the wide area that it was. This is what it's going to become. What's going to happen to the polar bears, the seals, the Inuit community, what's going to happen to them? That's what we have to consider. So the arguments in support of the statement: as geographers, we always like to look at the interconnections which is happening within a particular environment. The polar bear and the seal, they're two interconnected a mammal and a marine species within the Arctic ecosystem. Polar bears will have insufficient fat stores as a result of the melting of ice within the polar regions. This is due to the ice packs melting 2 weeks earlier than previous, reducing the time frame to which they can hunt. There's been a 22% reduction between 1987 and 2004 in the overall numbers of polar bears within the Arctic. The seal pups are younger when they have to leave the edge of the ice, and this is due to the ice melting earlier in the autumn. So if the polar bears have to go further distances, that means that they're going to be hungrier and they're not going to get the sufficient food supplies that they need for their young and themselves to live in these harsh conditions. The Inuit community and the walrus, the ice is melting at a faster rate, meaning it takes longer to form again. The Inuit community can therefore not go out into the sea to get their food supplies, as the ice is unstable. Therefore, if it's melting, they cannot walk along to actually do their fishing, etc. And then as the sea ice is moving into deeper water, there will be less food for the walrus, meaning they have to travel further and deeper to get their actual food. And if they have to travel further, that means their fat surplus will be significantly reduced. And if you think of the Arctic, the harsh conditions, it's going to be very difficult for them to stay warm within these conditions. Arguments against the statement: the melting of ice in polar regions will create an increase in transport. Large shipping companies are searching for fossil fuels. It's predicted that a quarter of the Earth's untapped fossil fuels are found within the Arctic region, and that's why if the melting of ice takes place, it'll be easier for these transport links to be developed. There's been an increase in the access in the Northwest Passage, allowing new shipping routes for tourism, specifically cruise ships. We could potentially easily get far greater access to the Arctic ecosystem as a result of this ice melting. As it's predicted by 2050, 75% of the current ice that's within the Arctic will be melted when what is wrong already. So, the summary. Yes, there are positives, both economically and socially. However, the physical environment has the potential to be destroyed by the melting of the ice as habitats, and will both destroy the Inuit communities and the particular habitats, both marine and mammal. And there could be a major imbalance not only to the ecosystems and communities, but also to the entire planet, and that is why we should be concerned about the melting of ice in polar regions. Thank you.